The Ministry of Finance's mid-year budget snapshot and report is out. The DNA weighing in on the report. The central bank's governor says the COVID-19 pandemic will have a great impact on the economy and the country recording another homicide. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lissy Bastian with your JCN Evening News for this Monday, February 1st. Thanks for joining us. The Ministry of Finance releasing its combined first 6 months fiscal snapshot and report on budgetary performance, and by all tokens, the report shows anticipated macroeconomic shock of the global pandemic COVID-19. The shock of the pandemic continues to be seen in the government's budget performance. With the details, we go to JCN's Jcn Saunders.
The government's total revenue from July to December declined by an estimated $430 million. That's 38.1% of the budget target. This all due to sharp contractions in receipts from value-added taxes, excise taxes, customs, import duties, and departure taxes. This much is revealed in the Ministry of Finance's combined 6-month fiscal snapshot report released last evening. The ministry adds that the significant widening in the fiscal deficit materialized in keeping with the expectations from the Resilient Bahamas budget plan, which foreshadowed a necessary increase in recurrent expenditure for health and safety measures to support social assistance programs and a significant decline in revenue receipts from subdued economic activity. Aggregate expenditure increased by $112.1 million. COVID-19 social assistance alone accounted for a 10.1% increase. That's $119.5 million in recurrent expenditure, while reductions in capital transfers of $17.5 million tempered capital outlays by 6.3%, or $7.4 million. Minister of State for Finance Kwesi Thompson says not only is the government continuing to execute its resilient budget plan for the current fiscal year, but it also adopted a new medium-term roadmap and fiscal strategy to address the macroeconomic conditions seen over the past several months. He says this means the government is taking care of the people by continuing what he is labeling as the government's dynamic COVID-19 response. He adds that the government's making short-term fiscal adjustments like reducing expenditure by an additional $200 million in the current fiscal year, and says they are laser-focused on the economic recovery, which means investing in small businesses and accelerating structural reforms. He says the ministry is optimizing the government's debt management framework and being vigilant and proactive in monitoring and responding to the ever-changing market conditions. Minister Thompson noted that the ministry has seen a strengthening in the revenue performance as the domestic economy opened and the tourism trade began to pick up in November and December last year. While the month of January is not covered in the report, he says he's pleased to advise that preliminary indications are that the government will likely meet and perhaps exceed the budgeted revenues for January. An encouraging sign, he says, in what has understandably been the country's most challenging economic period ever. Jcn Saunders for JCN News.
The Democratic National Alliance, DNA, weighing in on the government's mid-year budget report for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. DNA leader Arinthia Kumalafi says the report paints a gloomy picture and unveils the reality of the dire situation in the country. However, she says that even in the midst of this crisis, there are opportunities to rebuild better, create new industries, diversify the economy, and that it cannot be business as usual, which is why a $200 million reduction in expenditure at this time is worrying. She says the numbers in the mid-year budget report are concerning. Mrs. Kumalafi suggests major investments in agriculture, light manufacturing, and the micro, small to medium enterprise must be undertaken to boost the economy, along with a better structure and focus on management of the national debt. Mrs. Kumalafi says the government simply took more money out from the economy, from businesses and individuals via increased taxation. She adds a true transformation of the economic model is the only achievement worthy of celebration. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic will have a great impact on Bahamian economy even well into 2021, so says Governor for the Central Bank of the Bahamas, John Roll, during their quarterly economic press briefing held virtually this morning. He says that the virtual standstill of international travel in 2020 underscores the severe negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Bahamian economy. According to Governor Roll, it's estimated that the economy contracted by at least 16% in 2020. For tourism, cruise visitor activity was on pause since mid-March, and stopover arrivals are projected to have achieved no more than 1/4 of the levels reached in 2019. Governor Roll also touched on the foreign exchange market. Governor Roll added that the reason demand for foreign exchange contracted was partly because of the impulse from public expenditure. Another family left to grieve the loss of a loved one as more blood is spilled on the streets of the capital. The country's latest homicide victim is said to be a man in his mid-30s. We're told that shortly before 9 a.m., officers received reports of a shooting on DeVoe Street, east of Market Street. Here's Police Press Liaison Officer, Assistant Superintendent Audley Peters with more information.
The first responders, upon their arrival on scene, met the body of a male with apparent gunshot wound next to a vehicle. Emergency medical services were summoned, and after their examination of the body, it was pronounced dead. It was pronounced lifeless, rather. So that a vehicle approached the victim, two males exited and discharged a firearm upon the victim.
ASP Peters described the suspect's automobile as small in size, adding that no evidence suggests the matter could be gang-related.
Well, we're in our initial stages. Officers are canvassing the area. The information seemed promising, and in due course, as we follow the protocols and the assistance of members of the public, which encourage us to do our work, we believe that we'll bring this matter to a closure swift as possible.
This is the country's 11th homicide and the second within 72 hours. Police are appealing to members of the public to contact the Criminal Investigations Department at 502-9991 or 2 or 911 or 919. You're watching Jcn News. When we return, details on a police-involved shooting, a 25-year-old man charged with murder, the Attorney General and the opposition leaders' war of words, and the latest COVID-19 cases. Stay with us.